morning. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Sally Nugent.
Hello, good morning. Here are your headlines at 7 o'clock. A former top Chinese government scientist tells the BBC that the possibility coronavirus leaked from a Wuhan laboratory should not be ruled out.
We're joined now here on the sofa by Professor Tom Solomon from the Pandemic Institute. Tom, you have sat there many times over the last couple of years. It's a little while since we've spoken to you now. Why is it so important that we find out how this latest pandemic started and what work comes next after that?
I think it's important to understand how these kind of viruses emerge so that we can prepare for them in the future. And at the Pandemic Institute in Liverpool, that's exactly what we're doing. So we have, for example, a database of all the known pathogens, all the known bugs. We've looked at which ones in the past have jumped from animals to humans. That's called a zoonotic jump. And we're working on trying to think about what might happen next so that we can get the diagnostic tests, the drugs and the vaccines ready for what might emerge.
And the fact that we don't still yet know how COVID-19 began, is that a surprise that we don't know, or would you expect there still to be questions over any kind of virus at this stage?
Well, I think there's a lot we do know. We know the virus started in bats, and we know that it got into humans, and all the evidence suggests, and it's far and away the most likely thing, that this happened either from a human becoming directly infected by a bat or via an intermediate animal, perhaps in this market in Wuhan. So all the evidence suggests that, although, of course, there is still interest in alternative ideas.
I'm interested in the next stage then. How does it get from, we're seeing pictures of the closed market here, aren't we? How does it get from that to affecting all of us globally?
Well, this virus, this SARS coronavirus 2, was very good at spreading from human to human. And you may remember back in 2003, we had the first SARS virus, which made people very sick. That one was actually not so good at spreading from human to human, and therefore it didn't cause the pandemic, although it caused a large outbreak. And the most recent virus was better at spreading among humans, and of course that's what we have to look out for. Flu viruses are also very good at spreading from human to human, and that's one of the viruses we're studying at the moment in the Pandemic Institute.
On a hot, sunny day, 3 years on, it's easy to forget how many families were affected, how much damage it did to the economy, the loss of life, everything, isn't it? Do you think that there is a risk that we kind of delete those 3 years from our brains and our kind of understanding and we move on too quickly?
I think a lot of people want to forget about the last 3 years, and I don't blame them at all. Our scientists are not forgetting about the last 3 years. We're using them to drive us on in what we're doing next. It's also important that the government and research funders don't forget about the last 3 years, because it's only with the kind of funding that we're actually getting at the moment that we can continue to do the work to prevent this kind of future emerging infection problem becoming a pandemic.
OK, let's talk about potential future problems. You're, I imagine, working on all of those options at the moment. What are you most concerned about?
Well, at the moment, we're looking very carefully at avian flu, bird flu, because that's causing a lot of deaths among birds. It's not really a virus of humans yet, but we're looking at the kind of changes to the virus's structure that might allow it to become a human virus so that we're ready for it. And we're also working on diagnostic tests and potentially developing vaccines against it.
There'll be people kind of almost covering their ears and thinking that we're not going to have another pandemic. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. We need to move on. What do you say to them?
Well, let's hope we don't. And let's remember that there have been lots of other emerging infections in recent years. We've had Ebola, we've had Zika. So these problems do arise, and for the most part, we're able to contain them. And we did have a pandemic with flu in 2009, but it turned out not to be so severe. So I think for most people having their breakfast at home, we don't want to scare them or alarm them, but it's important for them to know that this kind of work is going on because there are threats from these viruses. And I guess as long as people like us at the Pandemic Institute in Liverpool are funded to do our work, then people can carry on having their breakfast in peace.
We talked about flu virus, we talked about coronaviruses. I know a third threat that you have been looking at is a mosquito-borne virus, because with climate change, that's something that could potentially be a huge problem.
Absolutely. So I've worked on mosquito-borne viruses for 25 years or so, initially in Asia. Some of these viruses are now found in Europe, And with climate change, as mosquitoes spread, the viruses that are passed through mosquitoes also spread. So again, this is one that we have to keep an eye on, but it's not an immediate threat. It's not going to happen this summer.
Professor Tom Solomon from the Pandemic Institute, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us this morning.